Hello and welcome to the Jewess Believer Radio Show. Join us in the kitchen as we Jewess believers share what we were taught growing up with our Jewish bubby. We combine family recipes with biblical truths and health tips to highlight the Hebrew and Greek culture. We are just a bunch of Mediterranean foodies who love Yeshua. So come join us as we dig a little deeper into biblical culture, health, and wisdom.
Hello, this is Jessica Stern Foster. I'm sitting here today in the Jewess Believer kitchen on the Chesapeake shores of Maryland. Recently, I heard one of my friends say, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade." Well, it's funny. I started thinking about some memories of my bubby telling me the same exact thing, but she was a little bit more elaborate in her approach of telling me what to do with lemons and how to use lemons because it's Bubby. Bubby has a million and one ways to use everything. Nothing goes to waste. Nothing goes unwanted. We make anything from lemons. And it's amazing because God's infinite resources, His resourcefulness, He turns lemons into lemonade. He turns lemons into anything. He could even make limoncello if he wanted. I mean, after all, didn't Jesus turn water into wine? But I'm reminded that as we go about our day and we face our fears with our faith, God's amazing power in changing a situation is much greater than we could ever fathom. No matter how bleak a situation may appear, we must remember that the Lord, nothing's impossible for Him. And as often as it has been said, the Lord is very good at making lemonade out of lemons. He says just about exactly that in Romans 8:28, a tremendous verse of scripture that my Bobby used to read to me. Unfortunately, this verse is so poorly translated in the King James and some other versions. So many countless people have used it to say that all tragedy, sickness, and death are good for the Lord's people and that that's part of His plan for them. In Romans 8:28, the King James Version says, "As we know that all things work together for the good that love God." Hear me there. And we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. That's a pretty powerful verse. The inaccurate translation has contributed to erroneous beliefs held by so many people that the pain and suffering in their lives is the Lord's will for them somehow. Somehow is for their own good. But is that really true? We interrupt for a quick Boobie ATSA. These are simply recipes from the Jewess Believer Kitchen with practical advice on the preparation and cooking techniques that have been used by my family for generations. Very often, we use butter with lemons and garlic in many dishes. While lemons are very distinguished from oranges and grapefruits and others of such, when I was doing some research about lemons, I found that there were 50 different species of lemon trees that were cultivated over 2,500 years. They began in Asia, ended up throughout the Europe area during the Roman times. Then they were moved into the Arab states and came to America. While lemons were initially ornamental, in the Asia area, they were actually used as medicine. I found this amazing because we use lemon in so many dishes. Now, of course, by the 18th century, it was a culinary staple that was used in so many dishes. And not just dishes, but in cleaning and used for different things. You often see like a lemon polish, all sorts of amazing ways to use it for cleaning. Now, whether you buy your lemons at the market or at a grocer or even at a market side stand if you live in a warmer climate, you should feel the fruit that you're going to buy. You want to opt for a smooth skin because it usually means there's less peel and more pulp, which means more juice. Who doesn't want more juice? Sometimes you can tell by the weight. If the lemon is small but it's quite heavy, you know it's full of pulp and juice. but you want to ignore any fruit that has blemishes or feels spongy by the squeeze of the palm of your hand because they're susceptible to mold. You want to choose lemons that are deep in yellow color and firm to the touch, but not too hard, not too large at each end, or show signs of damage or bruising because, well, like I said, they're susceptible to mold. A good quality lemon should feel oily, but fine with a smooth skin. Now, with any number of pesticides and fungicides and insects and bacterias and everything else that us moms and Jewess believers are concerned about, as we tend to worry just a bit, there's a quick remedy that you can do to get this off of your lemons or any fruit. It's 8 ounces of warm water, or more on the hot side, with 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. As you dip your fruit in and let the wax come off, you will have an unwaxed fruit, which you can use the skin, the inside juice, and the pulp. Enjoy! There's an author that I recently read, and he said, according to the Bible, suffering is a consequence of sin. It was not a part of God's original plan for design for the world at all. And how true is that? I mean, when he created the world and he created the garden, there was no sickness. Everything was perfect. Everyone was happy and blissful, and until, someone came and ate of that tree. So the view of suffering as anything other than evil is incorrect. It is inherently opposed to the will of the Lord. And since our lives contain evil as well as good, it is evidence that the view of the Lord's plans, that everything that happens to us is false. The tragedies of life are real. The grace of God can migrate the consequences of evil and bring out spiritual good, but it does not necessarily restore things exactly to their former condition. I remember my bubby telling me when I said something not so kind to one of my brothers, she gave me some nails and she gave me a piece of wood and started having me nail holes in the wood. And I'm sure that a lot of people have heard the story. The kid nails the nails in the fence, and then he's told to go patch them and paint them, or he's told to paint, and there's still holes in the fence. And now the paint might cover some of the nails, but you can't take back what you've already done. The same are true with consequences. When God's grace is sufficient for everything in our life, it doesn't always mean that the laws of physics which he created are not finite, because let's face it, if you throw a ball up, it's going to come down unless, there's some physical law that changes that. Like you throw a ball up that has hot air in it and you throw it up into a dense cold that's so cold it bursts and evaporates. Now, that's the extreme, but the normal, that's not the case. And it doesn't mean that God can't take things and make them new and show grace, because he does absolutely show grace, but a lot of times he uses those things to teach us. Just like Jesus spoke in parables, our lives are made up of parables because God is trying to teach us something as his children. So no matter how much the good results, evil is never more than made up for in the temporal sense. It often involves, to a greater or lesser degree, permanent loss. So whatever the spiritual or material good that follows, the negative experiences of life is due entirely to the providential activity of the Lord, not to something positive or beneficial to the experiences themselves. And yeah, that's true, but at the same token, God does show amazing grace, but that doesn't mean he's not trying to teach us something. Because just like the Israelites, do we really want to keep wandering in the wilderness? Do we really want to keep being lost and not knowing how to get through a situation? No doubt some people, even though they believe in the Lord, are responsible for their own affliction, because of their mental resolve, come through such suffering, better off for it. You hear people say, don't cry when it rains when you created the storm. And this is so often the case with people, that they'll create their own rain, and then when it starts to rain, they'll create their own storm. And when the storms come, they get upset and they don't understand. I often wonder if the Lord is either trying to cause or allow sufferings to people because of our own ignorance to teach us something. There are many people who have not endured suffering with their faith intact. How many people think that the supreme omnipotent Lord, the creator of the universe, was causing them or someone they love indescribable anguish and have turned away from him? How much easier it is to endure trials when you have an absolute confidence that they are not caused by the Lord, or that he is not working as hard as he can on your behalf, as Romans 8:28 says. Now, the New International Version translates like this: "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." It is really important to see the differences here between these translations of Romans 8:28. Both that hold to the King James Version say that all things work together for good. In other words, losing your job, getting cancer, or death of someone who's really close is somehow good. If that's the case, then people would say, "Oh, well, she's had cancer, speaking of me, and it's worked together for the good of the Lord. Yes, God has used it in my life to make lemonade out of the lemon, so to speak. But at the same token, I know that I do everything I can do to be healthy, and the genes that I have, well, I got those from my mom and my dad that were handed down from Boobie." The NIV translation, which most people feel is a little bit more accurate, reflects the Greek text a little bit more closely. It says that God is working for your good in every situation. Maybe you have lost your job. Maybe you do have cancer. I'm a cancer survivor more than one time. And maybe you've had someone very close to you die. These things are not good, but God is working for your good in these situations. Knowing this helps you to be closer to him and allow him to help you. Knowing this makes it easier for you to step out on the water and meet him with your faith. On the other hand, blaming him automatically negates your trust in him for help. I think often that the Lord works through secondary causes to achieve his objectives and to reach its highest expression in the Lord's use of developments that are inherently opposite of his will to accomplish his purpose. To respond creatively to suffering, we need to appreciate the Lord's ability to incorporate the negative experiences of our lives in us to fulfill his plan for us. We often speak to the Lord's plan for our lives, but just what this expression means is not at all clear in the thinking of many people. What picture do you get when you think of the Lord's plan for your life? Is that plan for you like a writer's script? Is it the movie in your mind? Is it all written out with every scene carefully plotted in advance? Has the Lord arranged everything that will happen to you down to the last detail? Does every experience have an assigned place in your life? Many people are convinced that this is the case in their view, but where does that leave the choices he gives us? Because he did give us free will. We interrupt for a quick Boobie ATSA. These are simply recipes from the Jewess Believer Kitchen with practical advice on the preparation and cooking techniques that have been used by my family for generations. My Boobie loved to clean, and her house always smelled amazing like fresh lemons. Now, most detergents and general household cleaning products are expensive, and let's face it, they're just packed with chemicals. Now, the humble lemon, it's natural and it's organic and it's environmentally friendly. And guess what? It's a perfect substitute for many of these harmful household cleaning products. Lemons have an incredible useful cleaning resource, and they can be used for a large variety of different chores in the home, not just cooking. They really do cost a fraction of the price, and they're just so much better for you and healthy, and they smell terrific. So if you want to have a lemony fresh smelled home, just like my bubby, then dig a little deeper and find out how to use lemons for not just cooking, but also cleaning. You can find more about how to do this if you go to thejewessbeliever.com and follow us on social media so that you can dig a little deeper and get some insight on how to be lemony fresh. That's it for this quick Boobie ATSA. God is intimately involved in our lives as much or as little as we allow Him. Recently, we talked about the measuring tools for life and the standard of authority of our lives as believers. That plumb line being the measuring form for our relationship with the Lord. When we talk about rich, creamy butter and how that butter processes and how it's churning and preaching, we have to remember that every detail, according to God's plan, is to bring us to where He needs us and where He can use us. Just like when my bubby used to have us churn the butter as kids, she had a very clear objective to wear us out. Because let's face it, kids have so much energy, and as we had to churn that butter so that we could get it done, so that we could have some butter, it was in that big, huge wooden butter churn. And I still remember the day that I walked in the kitchen and found her whipping the butter right in her electric mixer. So, of course, I was born in the 70s, and my bubby got an electric mixer when those things came out. So it was a little disheartening when I realized she did have the electric mixer, and I knew she had it, but it didn't ever dawn on me as a child that you could put the butter in there, use a big tea towel and cover it up and not have the splashing and make amazing butter. But it did do the purpose, and just like my bubby would do, there was a certain objective and a basic. It was in order to teach us something, but it was also something that would wear us out to keep us focused and keep us on track. How much is it the same that our God will put things in our path to keep us where He needs us to be? Because just like a child could easily wander down a path or into the street, we have to put little buffers around them and guidelines to keep them on the right path so that they're not running out in the middle of the street, because that would get them killed. How much is it our Father is just the same, that He is trying to keep us close? When I was doing this study to look at turning lemons into lemonade, I remembered many things that my bubby had told me. But I did do some research to find out a little bit more about lemons and lemon trees. Now, we all know that lemons are a bright yellow fruit, and it's unmistakably citrus in smell, and it's hugely versatile. Its value is to preserve and to flavor, and it has long been recognized to do that. But it also has a lot of other potential in the home: beauty products, health benefits, and natural cleaning products. And it is possible to use part of the lemon in the juice and the rich fruity acids and natural sugars to make many recipes. And for generations, it has been used as a remedy for chills and coughs, and basically to heal people like a prescription. It's also been used in sunburn and rashes for topical skin. So I found it very interesting when I was thinking about how the Lord can take lemons and make lemonade, but He can make so much more. And my bubby would often talk about lemons, which you would think is kind of a bizarre topic, but she liked lemons. And they're so versatile that she's able to create so many different parables, so to speak, as she would teach me. Now, we know that lemon is a citrus, and we know that it comes from a tree, But did you know that it was an evergreen tree? Now, it is native to Asia, and it did make its way through Europe and then, of course, then into the Middle East. So it made its way to Israel, but it does like subtropical climates. Now, in the States, you'll find a lot of times lemon trees in Arizona and California and Florida. I know that my parents have a lemon tree and a lime tree in their house here on the Chesapeake Shores. Now, theirs is potted and it comes indoors. They can put it out on the porch in the more warmer months, but we really do love our citrus. Now, of course, lemon trees, just like any plant, need sunshine and water, but they also need warmth. They need good drainage, and you have to water them often. So I was thinking about that, and I remember my bubby telling me how you really, just like a plant that you plant, your life in Christ needs to be the same. You need to go before the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. You need to go before the sun. So just like the sun is shining outside, you need that sun to shine on your life. You need the Lord to shine in your life. So just like a plant needs sun to grow, we need the Son of Man to grow. And we have to water ourselves. So water is just like the living word. It is the water to our soul. It's the nutrients. So we need nutrients. We need to be fed. And we'll get that by diving into the word, which we have been talking about milk and meat. And of course, as you recall, when we talk about milk, the Greek word for milk is gala. The Greek word for meat is broma. So the difference in the gala and the broma is that more solid, the complete and deeper spiritual doctrines of the gospel, and the milk is the basic elemental teachings of true believers, what believers learn first as being newborn babes. So going back a little bit, if we use the word, the logos, to interpret itself, which is a good basic study rule to follow, the words meat and solid food refer to the more advanced teachings, but of course the words milk, gala, do refer to those basic teachings. Interestingly, Paul uses part of the same metaphor when he writes to encourage scattered new believers in 1 Peter 2:2, as newborn babes yearn after the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow. As we get back further to that elementary truth of the word of the Lord, that logos, and we step back to the lemon tree and making lemonade out of lemons, we realize how versatile lemons are. I remember my bubby telling me that lemons were used commercially for the production of soft drinks, and that food flavorings and their use in the home had often been limited to culinary use by adding them to drinks. The lemons are tangy, and they do have a particularly juice in the fruit, but I do remember my bubby very often making homemade lemonade. Now, some people would ask me, oh, I bet she added a lot of sugar. Actually, she didn't. She kept it really tart. And I remember drinking hers, and it was like straight lemon juice. And she would add sometimes to a little bit of tea, and she never put sweetener in it. But she used some amazing tea bags, and I always thought that her drink was better than mine. So people often laugh when I'm in the South visiting friends that I will drink unsweet tea. And I'll kind of tease and say, it's because I'm sweet enough. And anybody who really knows the true story, I got that from my bubby. It was from one ginger redhead to another. So in thinking further, I was thinking, how do classic biblical examples of making lemons out of lemonade, how did classic biblical texts really tell us how to take lemons and make lemonade? Well, I think Joseph was a prime example of that back in Genesis. I want to say Genesis like 37 to 50. Those are chapters. I'm not going to read all of them here, but please feel free to dig a little deeper there. Now, was it God's will for him to be hated by his brothers? Was it the Lord's will for him to be sold into slavery? Was it the Lord's will for him to be framed by Potiphar's wife and thrown into jail? No, that wasn't God, and the Lord wasn't responsible for these evils. But because Joseph stayed faithful to look to the Lord and to trust him, God was able to work everything mightily in the whole situation, not only to enable Joseph to endure, but also to gloriously end the whole thing and deliver him personally and exalt him because of his humbleness. And in doing so, Israel's salvation was made for his entire family and the generations, including us as Jewess believers. When Joseph had become the Pharaoh's right-hand man, his brothers stood before him, and they said to him, "You plotted evil against me, but the Lord turned it into good in order to preserve the lives of many people." And that was in Genesis 50:20. How amazing, because that's lemonade. That's taking and making, and that might even be some limoncello, but it's definitely lemonade for sure. Now, in the early days of television in the States, children's shows featured an artist whose creativity was astounding and illustrations of the Word of God and God's faithfulness. And this artist would sit beside an easel with a large pad of white paper. Randomly, he would hand a piece of charcoal to one of the children and make him make any sort of scribble he wanted. He would then ask the children what they wanted him to make out of that scribble. And it might be an animal or a clown or anything that appeared in a child's imagination or seemed to pose a big challenge to the artist's skills. And the artist then went to work transforming the scribble into a requested image with an amazing ease and skill. It didn't seem to matter what the scribble looked like or what he even was asked to make out of it. The thing is that he could do it. And I remember my bubby sharing this with me, and there's these things called reruns. So just so you know, I saw those in reruns. Here's a Boobie ATSA for you. Despite having somewhat of a sour taste, lemons are incredibly good for us because they are packed full of vitamin C, healthy nutrients, and fiber. In fact, part of the lemon has something to offer. There are organic acids and lemon oils in the peel, fiber and antioxidants in the pit, antioxidants, vitamins, acids. How amazing is it just like that our Abba Father is so amazing that he would create something so little and take something and make it amazing. He can take the scribbles in life, the oopses in life, or even something that looks sort of amazing and make it even more amazing. Now, that's lemonade.
Thank you for joining us around the Jewess Believer Kitchen Table with Jessica Stern Foster. Like what you heard? Join us at thejewessbeliever.com. That's JEWESS, and pass it along to friends and family. Be sure to check out our page link for an archive of previous shows. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Jewess Believer. Join us for our next chat around the Jewess Believer Kitchen Table, where we will dig a little deeper into our heritage, faith, health, foodie love, and a wealth of biblical truths. Until then, Shana Tova and Shalom.